there's a workman rounding sheep ready for shearing. They were used or kept to produce wool. And the ranch hands looked after the sheep and lived a lonely life many months of the year. They had a cabin, 2 horses and their dog for company. Again, and their staple foods like bread, sugar, salt were delivered to them. And their pay consisted of a share of the land crop. And by carefully tending this share, it meant that in perhaps 5 years or so, they would have accumulated enough to start their own station. And in short, until the mid-20th century, sheep farming was at the heart of all social and economic development in the vast lands of Patagonia, and it was the invention of artificial fibers and fabrics that really hit them very hard. Now, the next one, Peter. Now, the Andean region is full of glaciers. Typical of this, here you see a small boat with 2 or 3 people sort of going around, looking around the glaciers. And in fact, this area contains the largest glacier field in the southern hemisphere. And the Argentines know it as the field of eternal ice. I think that's a lovely name. The field of eternal ice. There's another view of a glacier. And this particular glacier gives rise in turn to what is known as the Perito Moreno Glacier, which I'm now going to mention. The field of eternal ice provides several separate streams of glacial flows, and eventually they come into one stream, and I presume it's the sideways pressure which compresses the ice and turns the glacier into vertical sort of towers as you see them there. Now, this particular glacier is 20 miles long, and you can see it going back into the mountains. And the face, as we're looking at it, is about 2.5 miles wide, and it's about 80 yards high in the center. The hard center of this glacier moves at the rate of 6 feet per day, and on the fringes, at times, it moves as much as 15 feet per day. It's quite incredible. And it's one of the few glaciers in the world which is not decreasing in size. In fact, it appears, according to the experts, to be increasing in size. And the base of the glacier, as you can see, stands in water, and huge chunks of ice break off and fall into the water with a thunderous roar. And when we were there, we spent a fascinating 2 or 3 hours watching the color change, Peter, in the face of this beautiful monument of ice. Now, this photograph, as you can see, was taken during the summer. There's there's not much by way of ice in the water. Well, we sat there and watched the colours and listened to the roar of cracking and falling ice. And another interesting thing about this glacier is that its base spreads across a channel connecting the lake it is in, Lago Argentino, with another lake upstream. And there's a sort of ice bridge between the two. And over the years, this ice bridge builds up with the result that the water in the upstream lake actually rises at a height of about 29 yards. You can actually see the water line level around the sides of the lake. And this process takes about 7 years, people were telling me. And when the level gets up to, as I say, about 29 yards above the lowest level, the weight of the water breaks the ice bridge with a thunderous roar, and the water just floods downstream. And this is such apparently a spectacle, which happens, by the way, quite regularly, about every 7 or 8 years. Once it's known the breaking point is just about due, the tourists will go and camp along the shores of the lake and simply sit and wait for this spectacular event to happen. Well, moving on, no mention of the lands of Tierra del Fuego would be complete without including the legendary Cape Horn, which was first traversed by a Dutch captain in 1616. Peter? There it is, a very forbidding place. Icebergs, waves 150 feet high, and winds at 125 miles an hour. Our winds around here are about 12 to 15 miles an hour, so just visualize 125 miles an hour, and fierce tide rifts coming from each of the ocean. Numbers of ships and crews have been lost in attempting the passage, but it's interesting to note that during the California gold rush, many Americans going west from the east coast chose the Cape Horn route rather than face the Indians in their own country. I guess better the devil you don't know than the devil you do. Anyway, now the last thing I want to talk about, the Argentine gaucho. I'm sure you've all heard of the Argentine gaucho. And truly, though, he is really part of the Pampas story, not the Patagonian story. But he's so much a part of Argentine history and folklore that I'm going to include him in this account. It was said that a real gaucho must be a horsebreaker, use a lasso and voladores, be handy with a knife, ride bareback, and always land on his feet when thrown from a horse. And if that's not enough, he also has to be able to play the guitar and sing songs. Well, he led a very lonely life, did the gaucho, sleeping under the stars, his only companions being his horse. And the work of the gaucho originated in the early days of Spanish occupation, when they were introducing cattle and horses to the Pampas, the Spaniards took native women as wives, and their offspring stayed on the plains and worked on cattle. This resulted in the development of a gaucho subculture with all their own history and culture of songs and dances and their own records. I should mention too that the gaucho also would kill and skin a lot of the cattle which had gone wild, escaped from the ranches and gone wild. And the hides were taken to Buenos Aires and shipped, and this was the beginning of the Argentine leather industry. And even today they produce some magnificent leather products, saddles, ladies' handbags, all kinds of things. But the gaucho's life in those days was a very hard one. He was at the bottom of the social ladder, and his history, if anybody is interested, has been told in an epic work by the Argentine author Jose Fernandez, and it's entitled Martin Fierro. And it's as well known to Argentines as Shakespeare is to the English. But the legendary gaucho has disappeared into history. The Pampas has been fenced and turned into farms. But these slides show the modern gaucho as he goes about his business, mounted. I don't know whether you can see it, but the Argentines ride, when they're mounted, they ride on sheepskin. They spread sheepskin on their saddles, and they always use sort of quite heavy leather boots over their stirrups. I think there's another slide. There's a gaucho dressed, well, I wouldn't call him a gaucho now, a farm worker dressed. Point about the gauchos and their successors, these farm workers, they will not do any work on foot. The only work they will do is work that can be done on horseback. The gaucho is gone, but his image, of course, remains, and in rural areas, fairs are still held where farm people turn out in gaucho dress to compete in horsemanship and gaucho skills. Peter? Now there's a very handsome young man, beautifully turned out, both he and his horse, ready for these competitions. And I think you can see the big heavy stirrup covers or whatever they are that it has. Now I'm going to turn the lights on now, because we have here a few gaucho mementos. We talked about the boleadoras. Now here is an actual, this is not a tourist one, this is a real one. And these were invented by the natives. It's a stone covered in leather. It's a That's right, it's a stone covered in leather, which they would throw at the animal, and these longer leads here would wrap around the legs of the animal and bring it down. Everything of leather, Poliodorus. The gaucho knife, and from what I gather from what I've read in Martin Fierro, the book I mentioned, they were always very handy with these knives, and if they didn't like the way you combed your hair, you had to be careful or they'd take you outside. They always kept their knife back here in their belt. Huge stirrups they use. They still use stirrups like this in Argentina. And this is a typical Argentine whip. They all carry them. And here is a model of a gaucho. Both his boulders, his hat, blouse, bombachos. That was a gift from a young Argentine friend of ours. Now, no gaucho, in fact, no Argentine man today would be without his mate, and Peter's going to tell us all about the mate and give me a rest. Eh? Are you going to do it?
What?
Talk about the mate.
I don't know anything about it.
Peter's never had it to drink.
Um,
Jim here.
This is really like they drink this the way virtually we drink our tea. There's a shrub that grows, and the shrub is harvested, and the leaves are crushed into sort of small little pieces, and they're packed into the mate, and then boiling water is poured on that to infuse the tea, and then it is sucked up through this sort of straw which has a kind of filter on the bottom to keep the leaves out of the mouth. And it's widely drunk. In fact, our son, who lives in Argentina, when this is his mate kit, when he comes here, he always likes to have some mate while he's speaking to us. So, so that's the story of.
What's that?
This is the.
Oh yeah, this is what our son keeps his hot water in for the mate. Well, I'm just about at the end here.
There's one more picture here.
Eh?
There's a lot of picture.
Oh, yeah.
You turn the light out.
Well, you can show that, Peter. Yeah, all I wanted to do is give you a brief summary in conclusion about Patagonia today. It's become a world magnet now. I'll move on. Oh, Peter. It's become a world magnet for superb fishing and hunting with stock. Can you go back? Ah, that's the one. With stock imported from Europe, North America, and elsewhere. And huge actually huge blocks of fishing and land rights are owned by wealthy North Americans. And this is causing a great deal of dissatisfaction amongst the people there. And in a similar fashion, the growth of industry in Patagonia, by way of oil wells, refineries, mining operations, hydroelectric dams, and fracking now they're doing, is running into opposition on the part of the Argentine people, who are very concerned with the future of their environment. And undoubtedly, rail and air travel and tourism are going to play their part in connecting Patagonia with the more populated parts of the world. But it may still be that its sheer remoteness will always maintain for Patagonia its title as the uttermost part of the earth. Thank you.